Hi, it's Tim Grant.
And Nicci McLeod from the Righting Wrongs podcast.
This episode contains descriptions of terrorism.
We'll explore themes related to religious extremism, radicalisation and plots of violence. Listener discretion is strongly advised as some content may be distressing.
Our discussion will, as always, include an in-depth analysis of how forensic linguistic techniques played a role in unraveling the truth behind these events.
We hope you enjoy this show.
Righting Wrongs, an original podcast series from the Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics, Season 2, Episode 3, Terror in Denmark, Conversations from a List of Resolutes.
Hello and welcome to Righting Wrongs, the podcast from AIFL, the Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics at Aston University. We're all about improving the delivery of justice through the analysis of language. I'm Professor Tim Grant.
And I'm Dr Nicci McLeod, Deputy Director of AIFL.
We've described what forensic linguistics is all about in an earlier episode, Nicci. So how does this case fit in?
Okay, so this is a case where, and we've spoken about a couple of these types of cases before, this is a case where language evidence proved vital in a specific counterterrorism investigation, in this case in Denmark. So given what we've said about forensic linguistics, it's the use of language analysis to improve the delivery of justice, and that includes in specific cases. It'll become clear as we go through this episode and as we talk to this week's guest that this is a textbook example of that. We've got linguistic analysis, specifically discourse analysis, and this unravelled the often implicit meaning of instant messages that were sent between a young man of Kurdish background who was suspected of planning to travel to Syria to join ISIS, and another man who was suspected of trying to recruit him. So, Tim, we've got a contemporary case here. It's from 2015, so just 10 years ago, and one in which a forensic linguist was called upon to offer her expertise. And we've talked before about the purpose and the scope of forensic linguistics, so let's maybe just kind of get an idea of where this particular case fits.
So what's nice about this case is it involves a forensic discourse analysis. And discourse analysis is the study of language as a social activity in its social context and how socially we create meaning through language. Today's guest was asked to comment on a series of Skype messages between a man who was suspected of being radicalised and a man who was suspected of trying to recruit him to ISIS and get him to travel to Syria for military training. Before we introduce this episode's guest, let's open the case file.
Denmark 2015. There are growing concerns about citizens becoming radicalised, travelling to Syria to join ISIS, receiving military training and then returning to Denmark to carry out acts of domestic terrorism. Danish Parliament passed a series of legislative regulations restricting freedom of movement for these suspected foreign fighters. The regulations allowed authorities to revoke citizens' passports and ban travel out of Denmark for a limited period of time when there is reason to assume that the person will participate in activities abroad that may cause or increase a danger to national security. Just 1 month after this legislation was passed, on March 17, 2015, Danish police apprehended a 23-year-old male of Kurdish background, Kamil, on concerns he was planning to travel to Syria and join ISIS. The police confiscated his passport and seized his phone for investigative purposes. On it, they found a Skype chat conversation with another person, Faisal, who apparently was trying to encourage Kamil to come somewhere. Both interlocutors used Arabic pseudonyms in their online interaction, but otherwise wrote in Danish, although interspersed with common Arabic phrases. Police approached Danish forensic linguist Dr Tanya Karoli Christensen. They'd already made attempts at unveiling as much of the implicitly conveyed information in these messages as possible. However, they were concerned they might make mistakes in their explication. They therefore wanted a professional linguistic analysis of the language evidence. Dr. Christensen received no specific questions regarding the content of the chat messages or requests for any direction to be pursued, but was asked simply to interpret the data.
And of course, we have the forensic linguist in question, Tanya Karoli Christensen, with us today.
So we're delighted to welcome Dr. Christensen to Righting Wrongs today. Tanya is Professor at the Department of Nordic Studies and Linguistics at the University of Copenhagen and has flown to Birmingham to join us in our Righting Wrongs studio. She holds a PhD from Roskilde University, and her research has involved multivariate analyses of epistemic and discourse markers, and we'll get into that shortly, and of word order in subclauses in modern Danish speech. Most recently, she has extended her various linguistic methods to analysis of language in the forensic sphere. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you so much.
So, Tanya, this is a case that you took on in 2015 and that you wrote up in a chapter in Pickernell, Perkins and Coulthard in 2022. What was it that the police were asking of you initially?
Yeah, it's super interesting. They didn't ask me very much. So they told me that they might have a case that would be of interest for a forensic linguist like me. I'd given a presentation on forensic linguistics to a large group of Danish police investigators who were meeting yearly for some seminar. And one of them came up in the break and asked me, so I think I may have a case. It's about this Syrian warrior. That was the Danish term for a foreign fighter at the time. And we might need a linguist. Yes, of course, go ahead. Okay, I'll just need to talk to my prosecutor at home, and then I'll get back to you. And the only thing they asked me was to, I guess, interpret the data is pretty much what they said.
Can I just ask, because you mentioned you said he referred back to a prosecutor at home.
Yeah.
We don't have those in the British system.
Right,
so the police prosecutor link is somewhat broken. So is that a prosecuting magistrate or judge, or is it someone who's attached to the police force?
So it's not a judge. So the judge are perfectly insulated from all of the investigation and the decision to even indict someone. But it's organized in a way in Denmark that they're sort of separate. So the police do the investigation, but then they have each police district have their own one or two lawyers, they're trained lawyers, who are then the prosecutors who decide, okay, is there enough evidence to actually indict someone for a crime here? So that also means that if they are bringing in experts from the outside, they need to ask whether this makes sense. Does it hold up? Would it hold up in court?
Yeah, so I guess I'm getting at sort of where did the instruction come from? Was it the police officer or this prosecutor, or vaguely between the two?
I guess vaguely between the two.
Yeah.
I actually don't know very much about those conversations that they have. I just know that often it is the police who ask me about something, and then they will sometimes go back and check with their prosecutor if they're allowed to do that.
That's great. I'm really interested in the difference in the different systems and how they may affect how we're asked to do stuff.
Yes. It's so interesting. Yeah.
All came down to the seminar that you gave. So it's I just want that to be a sort of reminder for us all, really, that it is important that we get out there and speak to different organisations and groups of people, because that's how the word gets round.
Yeah, very much. I can tell directly on how many cases I get. That depends on how many presentations I've given or workshops I've given to the police.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation.
Sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so so they've come to you and they've sort of said, interpret the data.
Yeah.
What is that data? What have they provided you with?
So what they ended up giving me was a set of chat messages. So there are 192 chat messages between two people. And they gave me two data sets, which was interesting. And it was sent in the same email, and I was told that one was just what is called an extraction report. So that means that when you have like a cell phone, so this is the case here, they had apprehended this man and they took his cell phone, and then they can extract a series of messages, and then they can filter them depending on who is the person writing with. So that's what they did. They had Skype messages.
Yeah.
So that was one set. It only contained what's called timestamps, so you can see when was a message sent and the profile name of the person sending, and then the text itself. That's all. And then they had a second data set, which it contained the same items in a sense. So timestamp, profile name, and then the text. But then there were an additional two columns. One with translations from a professional translator of Arabic terms into Danish. And then the final one was the police own, I'd say, interpretations or comments on what they thought they were talking about. And I decided at first to only work on the original data without police commentary.
Yeah. And so I think we're going to maybe explore why that might be. I think this is an issue that's come up a few times on this podcast.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about why you would set aside that police commentary and only focus on the original then. What are the sort of biases that you're concerned about?
Well, I was concerned that I might get information on the case and on the people involved and things that are outside the language. So I want to base my analysis solely on the language evidence.
Yeah.
I really think that is my purview as an expert in language and linguistics. And I want to be very sure that I remain within the confines of my expertise. So I don't want to adduce anything else that comes from the outside. And that could be simple things like perhaps knowing where someone actually is in relation to where they say they are. Or it could be items that they're talking about which are left vague because maybe they know about the items, but as a reader who don't know them and don't have any background, you don't know what they are.
So part of the police commentary, they might have explained a location and that the person,
Right.
I'm making this up, but the person might be lying about where they are, and the police, that could be in the
something like that,
the commentary.
Yes.
What about the actual the translations you referred to? Did you disregard those as well? The translations from Arabic into Danish?
Since they weren't in the original, so that of course when they're chatting, they don't translate their Arabic terms,
No.
so they weren't actually there. So I didn't look at them until later on. So some of them are so familiar that we all know them, right? So salam alaikum, stuff like that, I would know.
Yeah.
Inshallah, I would know that. And a few of them I looked up if I felt they were necessary. But it turns out that quite a few of them are what we would call discourse markers, so they don't necessarily contribute that much information. Certainly most of the material is in Danish.
Okay, so you start with the Danish data,
Yeah.
and then later you do some checking up and looking at this other data set that was provided.
Yeah, I think it might be worth for listeners who are perhaps not so familiar with Arabic phrases, that it might be worth giving a little explanation of salam alaikum and inshallah, what those terms actually mean.
Right. Salam alaikum is a greeting. So you can begin by saying salam alaikum, and the other person can say wa alaikum salam. Inshallah just means
Means something
Great
like
be
God
to
willing.
God willing, something
Yeah.
like that. So these are terms that refer to Allah.
And are very frequent.
Very
terms
frequent
for
and
Arabic speakers.
it's not necessarily very Islamic, I'd say.
Okay, and what about, you mentioned discourse markers there. So what do we mean by discourse markers? These are present in English as well as in Danish. What do we mean
They
by
exist
that?
in many, many languages. So in English, a good one would be well. So it often used to introduce a new topic, so to sort of give a break in the speech, and then you mark that, okay, so something else is going on. I'm now continuing with something. O is a good discourse marker as well that can express surprise, new information, shift in activity, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got and but, and there are these sort of words that occur that don't necessarily carry any meaning themselves, but tell us something about the structure of the talk in which they occur.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've touched there upon what you didn't do, i.e. you didn't want to look at the police's kind of extra information and their interpretations and so on. So let's talk about the method and what you did do. Maybe just kind of give us a little breakdown of how you approached the linguistic data.
Right. So let's imagine that you're doing this for yourself, right? So you only have a set of messages and you don't know anything about the background of these two people. You can tell from the profile names that there are only two. And you can tell because you are able to read the language that they're writing in Danish. So one of the first things that I noticed that they, of course, both write in Danish, and they both have what we call L2 features, so second language features of Danish.
So L1 would be your first language.
Yes.
This is linguists speak. So
Yes.
my L1 is English.
Yes, my L1 is Danish.
Yeah. And L2, you might have several L2. I don't know.
Right. So, but my L2 is definitely English. I
Okay.
don't have any other language that I speak as well as
that's
English.
good. Well, 2 fluent languages is more than I achieve. I wouldn't claim any other L2. I speak some holiday language, but
Right.
I guess L2 suggests a certain level of fluency.
It does,
Yeah.
it does. So what we can see in many languages is that when we have people learning that language and becoming sort of next to fluent, you'd say, right? But they still have perhaps some difficulty with grammatical features, so that could be conjugating verbs and stuff like that. How do we mix and match words with each other so that it becomes grammatical?
So I was just going to say, those listeners who may have heard Series 1, we had 2 examples where we did an L2 analysis in an L1. There was the episode called Imposters Tending to the Wild, which was about a Greek national living in Edinburgh. And there were some online texts which were definitely not written in native English. And there was a question, could we identify that?
Yeah.
And I failed to do so on that episode. And then there was the other episode where Dr. Andrea Nini looked at the apparent retraction statement from a British teenager and demonstrated pretty convincingly that it was written in a version of Greek English, and so was more likely to have been written by the police officers. So that's the kind of analysis that you're thinking, that this isn't native Danish,
right.
There's influence of some other language on the Danish.
Exactly.
So this is the concept of interlanguage, isn't it? The idea that there will be influence from a person's L1 on their production of their L2.
Right. So I wasn't able to see from this data set what their L1 might be. I could just tell they weren't necessarily that fluent in Danish that they mastered the intricacies in Danish.
The approach that you actually took, then, does it have a name? Is there something that we might want to explain for our listeners here in terms of the method?
Yes. So I tend to call this, when I talk about it in English, I call it discourse analysis, which is a very, very broad term. It applies to many different things. So what I mean by it here is actually looking at a longer stretch of text and looking at how things connect within that text. So in this instance, of course, it's text messages, so it's chat messages, and we see how they interlock in a sense. So how is it marked grammatically, linguistically, that these things are connected to each other. So that's part of the discourse analysis. It also has what we call a pragmatic element, and that means that we look at context as well. So we don't only look at the data in isolation, but we try to imagine what would the context be to make sense of this. In this case, of course, I don't actually know very much about the context on purpose because I insulated myself from that knowledge. But still, we know from our everyday experience with language, it's just having two people interacting and the technology that they use, we know a little bit about things that we can extrapolate from. And we sort of try to bring that to bear on the analysis as well.
So this is interesting, isn't it? Because some people think of language analysis as being the study of word choices and grammar and things like that. And I think all linguists know that the meanings that we convey through language are created by wider and wider concentric circles of context. So the discourse analysis you've described is largely within the text itself. So we're having a conversation now, we're sort of asking questions, but sometimes I make a statement that functions as a question and so on. And that interaction, the study of how interaction works, is certainly part or one sort of discourse analysis. And then as you go out of those contextual concentric circles, what you then get is the fact that we're sat here in a studio at Aston University, we're recording a podcast, and that comes with certain conventions, genre conventions and so on. And that will affect how we interact too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've got different pragmatic contexts and textual contexts, and you're moving out from just the mere words and the grammar and the structure.
Absolutely. And still the words and the grammar play a major role in understanding this. But all the words and all the grammar, they have multiple possible meanings. So they're always polysemic, so have many meanings, right? So that means that if we take each word or each bit of grammar on its own, it doesn't tell us very much, actually.
Yeah.
But when we add them together, see how they're composed into sentences, utterances, longer stretches of text, we get more and more information from that. So an item that can be very vague or unspecific when looked at in isolation, when we then add in the rest of the context, even just given from this data set, we can understand so much more.
Excellent. So we can actually demonstrate exactly what you mean by this by looking just at one specific extract, very short extract from the data. So this has been translated from Danish into English. And so the English translation reads,
Aki, it went out.
I think that my first question, before we get into how this is obviously ambiguous and we need context to make sense of it, can you explain some of the problems that you had with translating directly for a start?
Yeah, so we're talking about this case based on an English translation of what was originally, as I said, in Danish with second language features. Anyone who's tried to translate from one language to another knows that it's not a question of translating word by word. It's not possible. The grammatical structures are different in different languages. So we often have to compromise quite a bit on our understanding of the original to get to something that sounds just a little bit natural in the target language, so here in English. But when I also wanted to, which was, I guess, a little bit ambitious, I wanted to convey the feeling of second languageness in this data set. So I have on purpose put in some mistakes or errors in the English translation to try to get the feel of this is not people who have English as their first language.
So this is the task you set yourself when you wrote the paper.
Yes, when I wrote this paper.
The paper's written in English, and so you required the English translation.
Yes, we couldn't just make do with the original Danish data. I had to make an English data set, yes.
No, that's great. So you tried to... So I feel now an analysis coming on to figure out whether those slips and errors you put in reveal a native Danish speaker or a native Arabic speaker.
Absolutely could be, yeah. Yes, and of course I wanted it to match as closely as possible the original Danish and also sound like second language English, but it's impossible to do that completely.
So going back to this specific extract then, can we maybe start with akhi? What is this? Where's it from?
So that's an Arabic term that means brother.
Okay.
So it's simply a word that means brother. They use it very frequently. They also use the Danish term for brother, which is bror. So they have both of them. Yeah.
Okay. And you were talking before about all items being polysemous, having more than one meaning. And perhaps we can kind of look at the multiple interpretations that are possible of it went out. So akhi, it went out.
Yes.
What could we possibly be looking at with it went out?
Yeah. So it is very interesting in this case because it is such a small word and it has almost no substantial meaning. So what it does in English and in Danish as well, the equivalent in Danish, is it points to something. So you have to know what it refers to. We call it sometimes an anaphoric expression that just means that it points sort of backwards.
Yeah.
It could also be considered deictic, so that it points outside of the context, or rather outside of the text, to something that's going on in the communication situation. And we don't know which of these two is correct in this instance, at first at least. So that is just initially sort of a placeholder, and we know that we have to look elsewhere to figure out what it is. Then we have went out. So to go out can, in English as it can in Danish, mean a multitude of things. So it can mean leaving a room, for instance. So if I go out, could be that. It can be something like a fire going out. Or other types of light sources extinguishing. Something can go out of fashion. So there's a ton of things, right? It can mean so many different things. So it depends a lot on how we interpret the it. So what does the it refer to will also help us understand what is the meaning of went out in this instance.
Okay, so we really need to look at some context.
Yes.
So we're going to do that when we listen here to this next extract. So this is extract 2. We're going to hear it in English first.
Can you speak?
Yes, brother, I can. Aki, the connection, it is bad.
Aki, it went out.
So obviously it was in Danish originally, and we'll play that now.
Kan du tale? Ja, bror, det kan jeg godt. Aki-forbindelsen, den er dårlig. Aki, den gik ud.
Tanya, maybe you could talk us through this. You've already talked about the process of translation, but is there anything else that you want to say about this extract?
Right. So what we see now that we have a little more context is that they are discussing speaking. So Camille asks, can you speak? And of course, again, that can actually mean more than one thing. For instance, could mean, can you speak freely? Or do you have time to communicate with me? Faisal then says that yes, he can, and sort of warns that the connection it is bad. And then we see a large gap in time, and you really have to notice what's going on in the timestamps right there, because actually there's a gap of 33 minutes and 18 seconds between Faisal saying, yes, I can, Aki, the connection it is bad, and then Kamil comes in again and says what we heard before, Aki, it went out. So we have a large gap here. And we can speculate what is going on in the intervening time. Mm-hmm. Since they've been talking about speaking and a connection, it is likely that they have actually dropped writing, texting each other, and gone over to talking. Okay. Because this is Skype, so they can shift pretty seamlessly, I guess, between texting and actually talking.
Okay, so they've had a call potentially in this intervening period.
That's my guess, right? Mm-hmm. That they have had a call. And that would make sense for Kamil then to say, it went out, and mean by that the connection.
Right, so the connection is dropped.
Yes.
So we've worked out then what the meaning is based on kind of looking at some of the context. And obviously in ordinary interaction, we work out these meanings, we fill in the blanks. Quite often, this is a fairly kind of routine thing that we do.
Yes.
Is there anything kind of, what's different about the sort of forensic context?
Yes. So what we do normally is that we don't even think about doing that. So it just happens subconsciously. We don't notice the enormous wealth of information that we bring to bear on what we hear or read from other people. It's actually amazing how much extra information we are able to sort of glean from these little bits, right? It went out, very, very small items there. But what I need to do as a linguist when I work on this is to be extremely precise and to explain every little step of this type of analysis, so sort of in the way that we just did. And I also need to be able to refer to the correct theories and methods for doing this so that I can show that this is scientific. We're doing this rigorously. So I'm really very detailed and step by step in my explication.
So can you dive into that a bit? What sort of theoretical background explains the interpretation you've just given us, and it's a perfectly credible interpretation. I'm not challenging you.
No, I understand.
But if I were to mount a challenge in court, I say, well, this is, this doesn't take a linguist. The court could make this inference. We don't need your evidence.
Well, in this case, I probably would agree that most people could make this inference. But I can tell you that when I later on looked at the police data, they not only made that correct inference that that's probably talking about something that has been lost, the connection. A few steps later, they overinterpreted the data, and that is what can happen very easily. So they now conclude that these people must have known each other for a long time, not just through this interaction on Skype. Many of their hypotheses seem to be based on this supposition that they have known each other for a long time. And they seem to forget that there was this gap of 33 minutes where they can have talked, and we don't have access to that, right? So it's not like we have a recording of what they said. There's a lot of information that we don't know. So it's just as much a warning against overinterpreting these data. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah. So in this case, your expertise is recognizing where you might do that overinterpretation. And you've insulated yourself from the police hypotheses at this point. So you don't know any of that.
No.
But you just write your interpretation, only what we can infer from this analysis, and not to fill in the gaps too much.
Yes. And that's why making note of the polysemy of words and even constructions is important, because that means that I am able to maintain more than one hypothesis at a time.
Of course.
I don't close it in immediately, right, and focus on just one. And I sort of try to keep the multiple hypotheses open for as long as I can until there's something else in the data that contradicts it.
Yeah. There's a nice theory in linguistics which does help explain that process, because there's Bell's theory of audience design, which means if we are talking together, I'm designing my utterances to be understood by you. So this it went out is designed for that interaction and that person.
Right.
And then if you move to other audiences, people, you're effectively, as an analyst, and the police are effectively overhearing.
Yes.
Yeah. And what Bell's theory of audience design suggests is that the communication isn't designed for you, so you're more likely to make mistakes. You're
Yes.
more likely to take one of the alternative meanings than the right one understood by the two people in interaction.
Especially if you have a particular agenda.
Yeah.
So this is a term that comes from Roger Shy. So Roger Shy has a theory called the inverted pyramid, where he tries to show that sort of if you imagine a triangle with the widest part at the top and the narrowest part, the pointy part at the bottom, so that's why he calls it inverted. The words, the grammar are at the bottom. And then as they widen out at each layer, we have more and more. So it resembles the concentric circles that you talked about before, right? So there's more and more information as we go up. And in conversations, people can have different agendas. So they can have different things that they want out of this. And in this case, the overhearers, the police that are looking at this data from the outside, may have an agenda of proving that this defendant did something that they think that they did. And that means that there is a very large risk of over-interpreting, proving their own agenda, right?
Absolutely. And that bias, because it is bias,
Yeah, that is
it
bias.
can be conscious. It also could be unconscious. They are police
Absolutely.
officers trying to avert disaster of one sort or
Absolutely,
another.
absolutely.
It doesn't have to be an accusation from
No,
the
no,
police.
no, no, no. I'm not accusing them of doing anything bad. It can be very subconscious.
And I think it's worth saying as well that even for overhearers who don't have an agenda, still a reliance on your intuitions as
Yes.
a native speaker is not a reliable reliance.
No.
So I don't know if that goes well together.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So yeah, even without that agenda, there's still issues with kind of just relying on what you think you know.
Yes,
about
absolutely. Because as ordinary language users, we are not necessarily aware of everything that's going on in language.
Let's move on to look in a bit more detail at some of the extracts that you analysed in the case and in the paper that we've been reading. So in that chapter, you group the analyses according to theme, and one of those is money. So let's hear that extract now.
Aki, I couldn't bring more than 20. May Allah give barakat in it.
It more than enough, Aki.
Aki, should I exchange all the money into euro here from Denmark?
Yes, or in Turk. You can do it.
I'll do it here. Maybe they give more here.
So from that extract, what kind of information did you glean?
Well, this is interesting again because it has sort of minimal information in some parts, right? So what Camille says is, I couldn't bring more than 20. Well, 20 of what? We have no idea what the 20 refers to. So it could be pens or shirts or socks or something that you can bring with you on travel, right? So there's a number and we don't know what that refers to. There's an amount, we don't know what it refers to. But then his participant in the conversation, Faisal, says, that's more than enough. Okay, so we know it's sufficient for something, right? And then a little bit later, Camille sort of reverts to it, is my interpretation, should I exchange all the money? So the money could also refer to something that has already been brought up earlier in the conversation. So that is a definite article showing that you should interpret this as something that is well known for the both of us at this stage in the conversation. That could be then the 20. Now, all the money and more than enough would not likely refer to, I think, many currencies, just 20 of something, so 20 pounds or 20 euro or $20 is not a whole lot. So more than enough and all the money, I don't think would refer very well to that, just 20. So, right, $20 or 20 pounds. So since we know that he's in Denmark and he also talks about exchanging the money into euro, we know that they're not in euro at first, and a likely currency could then be Danish kroner. But again, not 20 Danish kroner. They're not worth that much. So it's
How much is 20 Danish kroner for our...
So in British pounds, it would be around £2.
£2.
Okay.
Right.
£2.
So
Yeah, definitely not.
So not enough for many things to travel, right? So I'm guessing that it's just the conventional way of abbreviating thousands. So we do that in many languages. 20K is something that is sometimes said in at least American English. And you can do that in many languages, just sort of abbreviate it to 20. So my guess was this could be 20,000 Danish kroner.
And there was something that supported that
Yeah,
conclusion.
so it turned out that when I, at a much later stage, actually looked at the police report, they say that he had at this point gotten a loan from the bank of 20,000 Danish kroner.
Okay. So the next theme, that's kind of money was the sort of first theme that we've touched upon there. The next theme you talk about in the chapter is battle and war. So let's listen to another extract from the chat.
There are many that went home, then when fights happened with FSA, and came here again. Aki, I have to go fight now. Don't know when I return or if I return.
So what was your approach here, Tanya, and what did you work out from this section of text?
Yeah, so it's interesting when we have terms that relates to fighting. That can also mean many things. So both in English and in Danish, fighting can be physical, but it can also be metaphorically used, right? So you can argue, you can have kind of a verbal fight, right? So fight about something. And at least in Danish, it can also be like sports matches and stuff like that.
In English too.
Okay, right. So a boxing match could be a fight. So there are lots of situations where it doesn't have to be warring. So it's not a war battle necessarily that they're talking about. So that was one thing that I noticed. Okay, the fights happened. Okay. Then there's the abbreviation FSA. I actually didn't know what that was to begin with, but I've learned later that it is the abbreviation of the Free Syrian Army. And then army, of course, can be brought to bear on that as well. So if you know that FSA can be an abbreviation of Free Syrian Army, then you might also deduce that and think, okay, so fighting could actually be violent fights here. But then when we get to the point where Faisal says that he has to go to fight, again, we don't know what that is, but he says, I don't know when I return or even if I return. So that would sort of remove all of the metaphorical uses. So us arguing or even boxing would probably not lead to me being in doubt as to whether I might even return, right? So that indicates that it could be fatal, that he could die from this. So that changes the whole picture. That now locks in the meaning of the word fight. It disambiguates it so that we now are pretty sure that this must be a very violent fight.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you've started with this idea of a set of potential meaning. And as you unpack the contextual clues, you're sort of discarding some potential meanings and focusing in on others until in this case, in your analysis, you've arrived at a single meaning. This has to mean a physical warfare. That's what the word fight means, not an ideological fight or some other metaphorical fight.
Yes, and it's funny because in all ordinary language, when we use that terminology, we use it for many things.
Yeah.
So political fight, we use it ideological fight. We use it all the time, but we almost all of us use it in a metaphorical sense. So this is the opposite. Now we see the really concrete, the literal meaning.
Of course, yes, it's very interesting. So also in your explanation then, you sort of suggested that Faisal appears to be more active or more knowledgeable, more authoritative perhaps of the two. And in many instances in the conversation, he's really quite direct in his instructions. So let's listen to a few examples of that from across the chat, from at different time points in the chat. So extract 6.
Okay, brother, take care of your stuff. And then contact me, inshallah. Just take care of your stuff in the meantime, so you are ready. But just take care of your stuff in the meantime, Aki.
So we've got 4 separate occasions there where Faisal says, take care of your stuff. What were your observations around that?
He doesn't just say this once, right? He could have just said, take care of your stuff, and we don't know what that stuff is. But he keeps repeating it almost verbatim, the same thing over and over again, and it makes it feel like it's very urgent, that this is really top of mind for Faisal, right? So get your things done so that you can come here. Come here and join me is what he also says sometimes. He doesn't say join me, but come. So he has to proceed, Camille. There is just sort of no delay is accepted from him. So what we see is that there are 2 types of obstacles for Camille coming to join Faisal wherever he is. And one is some stuff that needs to be done, and we can perhaps return to that. It has to do with some paperwork. So that's one thing. And another thing is that Camille keeps bringing up that he's concerned about people talking about him. And it is primarily people at Faisal's location. So Faisal does a lot to dispel those concerns. So he says that Camille shouldn't worry about what people are saying about him, that he can even get him a special kind of recommendation that should dispel all those concerns. And then again, he keeps urging him to make things ready, fix your stuff, do this, get here.
We've got a bigger stretch to hear where we can really get this sense of Faisal's kind of commitment and sort of repeated sort of urging.
Mm-hmm.
There is no problem, Callas. I talked to the brothers.
It big area. Maybe those who are beside you.
I'd tell you what happens.
They don't know me.
Just take care of your stuff in the meantime so you are ready. But who from here talks about you says you work with PT? The ones in DK I don't care about. They can come here first, then afterwards talk. But those here, who says you work with PT?
No one is. But I don't want them to believe such things.
Aki, you shouldn't mind those who sit among Fukar and talk.
I said to them, I have to go to Turkey, by my family, and come back.
Callas, you shouldn't care about what they say.
But then I couldn't make it back.
Unfortunately, a lot of them don't have anything to do but sit and talk. But just take care of your stuff and contact me, brother. Inshallah, may Allah make it easy for you. And from here, we give you tazkiyah, inshallah. Not think about anything, my brother.
Amen. I just think if brothers from there see me again, then they think, he has been away for a long time.
Aki, there are many who have just arrived, and they were away. There is one who just arrived with his wife, a couple of months. It has happened for many, not just you. Just come, don't think about it.
Insha'Allah, Aki. But try to talk to some of the leaders about me. Maybe they see me as an uncertain brother.
Okay, Aki, I can look into that for you. But just take care of your stuff in the meantime, Aki.
From that long extract, Tanya, what's your analysis of what's happening here?
Right. So they are discussing the thing about someone talking about Camille. And we all know that talking about someone can be good or bad, right? So I, of course, surmise from this that it is not good since he seems so concerned about it, preoccupied. He keeps mentioning it. And Faisal distinguishes between people talking in Denmark and people talking at his own location. And he says several times that he doesn't care about the ones in Denmark, and those here near him is what it means he can talk to. And he can sort of make the concern go away by talking to them and getting him what's called a recommendation, a tazkiyah. He keeps pressing, take care of your stuff, and then I will deal with the problem that is here locally, people who may think poorly of you for some reason. And the reason maybe is what Camille mentions, that he has been there before and left and promised to come back, but he did not return as quickly as he had intimated that he would.
So Faisal is, in a sense, reassuring him or something like that won't matter as much as Camille thinks it will.
Yes, yes. So at some point he says, they may think that I'm an uncertain brother. So that may mean that he's some kind of dangerous brother or someone who can't be trusted. So leaving and not coming back, of course, can be a reason for someone not trusting you.
Yeah, of course.
So things have been still kind of vague up to this point, but we're going to hear an extract now where we can hear things getting a bit more sort of concrete, and we hear a few more specifics.
Did you speak to the brother?
I just got the brothers near. I'll call and talk to him today. So today night or tomorrow, I tell you what he says, inshallah.
What then if he can't help?
He can, brother. There are always brothers there that can help. It is their job to bring people in. They don't do anything else. May Allah reward them for that.
I won't be like I come there, and then I am alone. Amin.
No, brother, you'll get a number before you arrive, inshallah.
So, in that conversation there, as I said, we're starting to get some more specifics. What are your observations of that extract?
Yeah, they're talking about so the NR is an abbreviation in Danish for number. So that could be a phone number, since they're also talking about talking on the phone and calling and stuff like that. So at this stage, Faisal has gotten some contact in a location that Camille can reach out to and, I guess, plan in more detail what is going to happen. And then Camille says, what if he can't help? And then again, Faisal reassures him and says he can. That's all they do. They are there to bring people in. So clearly, there is some final location that Camille wants to go to, and it seems to be difficult because he needs help. Someone can bring him into that location that they keep not mentioning. Which is interesting. And we had in an extract earlier that they're talking about Turk, which is Turkey, and they also several times mention Istanbul. So we have one location which is openly mentioned, Turkey and Istanbul, and then they keep not mentioning where that place is, where Faisal is. So what I interpret as a final location. So I see Turkey as a transit location, and there is someone who needs to help Camille get to that final place where they need to go. And it's difficult, clearly, since he needs help. And of course, you need to know something about geography to determine what might that, if we guess, neighboring country be. And there are many countries that neighbor Turkey, and one of them is actually Syria. And remember that I was told at the beginning by the police that this was a case about a Syrian warrior. So that was sort of the one bias that they had introduced verbally to me, which I couldn't insulate myself from.
Yeah. It's really interesting as a point of discourse analysis that if this wasn't a covert conversation in some way, if this was an open conversation between friends about travel plans for a holiday or something like that, that you would mention the final destination.
Wouldn't you? Can you imagine? Can you imagine going to Japan and making a stop in Dubai, for instance, which is a travel route you can take. So you can go by Dubai to Tokyo, for instance. Can you imagine only talking about Dubai and never talking about Tokyo as your final destination? I think that is very
It
weird,
is, isn't it? So as linguists, we're really interested in this idea of markedness, of what's salient or marked in a conversation, and this absence of information is part of that, I think.
And what we would say is that this is a violation of quantity, the maxim of quantity. Maybe you can explain a little bit what I mean by maxims before.
Yes. So this is a term that comes from Herbert Paul Grice, who was also within that whole field of pragmatics and talked about maxims that sort of govern conversations. So he had the cooperative principle, which says that we expect everybody to contribute meaningfully to a conversation. So when we listen to what other people say, we expect them to say something that is relevant to the conversation at the stage that it's in, is basically what he says. And then he has some maxims to spell out. So what does that mean? And one is the maxim of quality, which just says that you are expected to speak truthfully. And one is the maxim of quantity, which says that you shouldn't say too much and not too little for someone to understand you. And we orient very much towards that often in our conversation.
So, for example, a parent asks a teenager, where are you going? And they give the answer out. And it's not that there's a particular implicature being generated, a particular meaning that the parent is supposed to take from that, which is mind your own business, essentially. But it's purposefully by not giving enough information that they've managed to generate that alternative meaning.
Yes. And that would be too little information for the parent, right? So the parent actually wants to know, where are you going, not just out of the house. So that is very much what's going on here as well. We can determine from the conversation that they're talking about traveling and going somewhere to wherever Faisal is, but we can't see where that place is because they never mention it.
Because they're violating that quantity maxim.
Yes.
So you've given us loads of detail there, Tanya, about how you approach those extracts and the kind of the observations that you took from them. How did you go about actually presenting these findings for the police and for the people that instructed you?
Yes, that was difficult, actually. I didn't know exactly how to structure my report because I hadn't been told that they were interested in anything sort of particulars. And so it was difficult. So I ended up doing it chronologically, going message by message and showing what can we tell from this message. And then we can sort of add on as we've been doing, right? So the way that we've disambiguated fight and disambiguated it and went out and all of those things. So those were things that I explained. So I showed the example, and then I explained, so what is that we can tell from this data set? So actually, I just want to go back one step. What I did first was I sent the police a preliminary report based only on that original data set without any information from the police, without that supplementary information that we talked about before. I went sort of stepwise. Okay, so both have Danish as a common language. Both seem to not have as the first language, and they're talking about other languages as well, so we can see that Camille, from at least that's what they say, that he speaks Turkish and Danish, but not English, for instance, and not Arabic. So we know something about their language resources. We know that they're not at the same location, and we can tell from the way that Camille refers to the places that he is traveling back and forth between, that he is in Denmark. He mentions several Danish cities. And then we have the here and there, which is fun. So here means near the speaker, and there means some place away from the speaker. And it can be sort of close. So I could even say, so what do you have there, Tim? And we're not very far apart in this room, actually. So that depends on, again, on the context where they are referred to. But they keep, of course, as everyone does, shifting. So what is here for Faisal is there for Camille, and vice versa. So we can tell that they're not in the same location. And so I go step by step sort of to explain all of the little bits and pieces that we can make out, the amount, the 20, what is that likely to mean. So I sent that to the police with a big question mark, in a sense, to say, is this something like what you were looking for? And they say, yes, this is great. Can you write it up into a final report? And please do look now at our sort of extra investigation that we have added into that police commentary. And so I did look at that, but I still wanted to make very sure that I showed to the court that this was based on a language analysis. So I tried to do the step-by-step chronological explication only based on on language. And then once in a while, I would add in, the police report says that this refers to this and that. So in many instances, the police report would say that Faisal is in Syria. So they have, I would guess, some independent verification that he was actually in Syria, right?
But you made it clear that your analysis was independent of that extra information.
Yes, that was what I was trying to do, right? So make it very sort of explicit. When am I drawing on contextual information that is not in the language evidence?
So, reflecting on that process and on your report, were there alternative methods that you could have used or considered at the time and decided to discard, either with hindsight or at the time? What other ways to approach this kind of problem, I guess?
Well, there are other ways, but some of them may be more sort of interesting for other types of analyses. And I would have needed a more specific instruction from the police, I think, to pursue them. So one of the things that I've actually been using this data set for later in teaching is looking for second language features.
Okay.
And I've also actually used it, so that can be used for profiling, as you've talked about before. So social linguistic profiling, you can say something about where they might at least not be from, so not originally from Denmark. And I can also use it for authorship analysis because they write in a different manner. So one has a setting on his phone where every message starts with a capital letter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he uses, so that is Camille, and he also has the Danish letters E, Ø, and O. So those are very specific to Danish, right? Which Faisal doesn't have on his phone, and all of his messages, they don't have any capital letters at all. So it's very easy to do an authorship analysis based on this. So I use it for many other things, but you could have done also, I guess, a more classical type of conversation analysis where you take it sort of turn by turn, interpret it as you would a spoken conversation with turn taking. You could do that. Some of the things may overlap a little bit with what I'm doing. You could do a topic analysis to see what kind of topics are brought up and sort of recirculate it again and again. You can see what is of concern to one person and to another. So there are other things that we could do, but I think that when the task is so open as here...
I was thinking that,
I really do feel that the discourse analysis was a good choice.
Yeah. And also that whole toolbox of techniques we use as linguists. They can answer different questions about the text. And
Yes.
and I guess you had some idea of the interest. Is that, well, what's going on here was a
Yes.
sort of, is a vague instruction, but was at least the instruction. It was about the content, the meanings in the conversation.
Yes.
And that probably drives you to a discourse
Yes.
analysis type approach.
I built a hypothesis for myself, which was they may be interested in what his goals and objectives are.
Yeah.
Right? That would be a thing that police could be interested in. So what is the defendant's goals and objectives? That was what I was looking for.
For sure. And then the approaches that you took, the discourse analytic approach, helped unpack that, helped understand that, and along the way provided a basis for resolving the ambiguities
Yes.
that you found in the
Absolutely.
language. As that overhearer, you weren't part of the conversation, so there were perhaps more ambiguities than had you been a participant.
Absolutely, yeah.
In a nutshell, I mean, there's so much analysis here, and you've kind of gone into so much detail. What were those main conclusions that you were able to report back to the police?
Right. So, as I mentioned, we could tell that they both write in Danish and are very well versed in some Arabic phrases. That Camille is in Denmark and Faisal is in some foreign country that is accessible from Turkey. We also can tell from the data that Faisal's place, his location, has a very poor internet connection. It's even dependent on the weather. He mentions sometimes that the internet connection is poor because it's raining. Yeah. And then we know that Faisal wants Camille to come. He encourages Camille to come to his location, and that Camille actually wants to come because at one point he says, "Remember me in your prayers, that I come without hindrance. This is my hope." And then that there is some paperwork to fix, as I mentioned earlier. And I didn't know what that paperwork was, but at one point he mentioned that his passport is still there, which might be where Faisal is.
Okay.
That could mean that he has been there before and left the passport there and not brought it with him when he left. So maybe the paperwork is related to getting a new passport so he can travel. That is actually very interesting because what turned out in the media after the case is that that was a thing that happened very frequently with ISIS, that they took people's passports when they sort of had been recruited to come join them. They made these lists of people who arrived and what their type of job functions for them would be, and then they kept their passports so they wouldn't be at risk of leaving so much. So this makes a lot of sense when we know some more about this context, which I didn't know at the time. Yeah.
Any further observations to add?
Yes. So we talked about the fact that there were people talking about Camille, and this is a bad way of talking about them. Faisal reassures Camille that he shouldn't worry about that. Then there's an odd exchange that has to do with Faisal instructing Camille to delete an image. And I am suggesting that it must be from an online profile because in just 11 minutes he confirms, yes, I've deleted it. It turns out later, and this is gruesome, so I want to warn that already that people who don't like gory details should maybe turn off just for a second. But it turns out that this is a picture of Faisal holding up two severed heads.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that Camille had gotten access to that picture and put that on his Facebook profile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then nearing the end, Camille writes that he is waiting and then writes 6 days, inshallah. And that combination of phrases likely means that what he is waiting for will happen in 6 days. And I expect that it is him leaving Denmark and traveling to Turkey and then probably Syria, which I haven't put that in this first preliminary report. I keep to the point that there is no mention of the final destination. Yeah.
Those were your findings. How were they used in the wider justice process? So was that the last you heard? You delivered your report and heard no more, or was there some further engagement?
There was further engagement in this case because it went to court somewhat under a year after I had gotten the case. So I got the case in August of 2015, and in June 2016, I was summoned to court as an expert witness. This was a very high-profile case in Denmark because it was the first that was brought under the new legislation that had to do with trying to prevent people from even joining ISIS. So not even actually prosecuting them for having done something terrible to Denmark, something illegal in terms of the existing legislation in Denmark, but preventing them from going there and then becoming possible domestic terrorists later. So this was the first case brought under that new legislation, and it was considered a counterterrorism case. So there was a lot of security at court when we arrived. So as we see in the movies, right? So people with big machine guns, that is the police with machine guns and vests, and you were frisked when you were entering, and everything, your belongings checked. And I was put in a waiting room alone and just sat there waiting for my turn, because you're not supposed to hear anyone else's testimony before your own. I guess it's the same.
It's the same here.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a very good idea. And then I got in and testified. So it works as in many countries, I think, that the prosecutor goes first. She actually read out my entire report.
Yes.
Even with mention of brackets and stuff like that, which was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
But what happened before they even got to that stage was the defense attorney objected to my testimony.
Okay.
So he said that the witness might have been contaminated by the police. And I was sitting there, what's going on now? And am I going to be thrown out from this? Will they dispel my evidence? And I thought, too bad, I've done so much work.
Yes.
I really put a lot of work into
Got
this.
this far.
I really wanted to also have the experience. So this was my second court appearance in Denmark. So it was important for me to try that out. And then, of course, the judge asked him what was that about, and he said, well, the police have given them access to all of their background information, which was true, right? They sent me 2 data sets, one with just the extraction report, just the data, and then the other one with all the investigative interpretations, right? And I was just really wanting to say something, but we can't, right? We can't interrupt the process in court. So I had to wait my turn, and then luckily the prosecutor asked me to explain what had happened. And I told, I had done it only based on the linguistic data, and I had even sent the police a preliminary report based on that. And then the defense attorney complained that he hadn't gotten access to that preliminary report. But of course, that wasn't my fault. That was the police. They didn't do their job in that instance.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being a bit of a back and forth, and the judge asked, so do you want to dismiss, or do you want us to? No, rather, would you like to object to the witness? And then he said no, but he wanted to make a note of it.
Okay.
Right.
So that's interesting, isn't it? Because we often don't have control over what is sent to us by the police and how the police brief us. But that was the main point of challenge in the case. They didn't challenge your actual linguistic analysis. Then.
No, not at all. So the interesting is he had a rhetorical trick in a sense, the defense attorney, because he, of course, I mentioned several times in the report something about Syria, because I mentioned in the police report, it says that this is in Syria.
Sure.
That was mentioned several times throughout my report. And I kept sort of trying to really maintain that strict division. The language data says this, the police say that. And then he went through that over and over again, and he said, but does it say that they are in Syria? And I said, no, they don't say. Several times, so many times, in fact, that the judge interrupted him and said, the witness has answered the question.
Yes.
And then he continued a few times, and then it turned out what was his point with this line of questioning. There were 2 points where I'd forgotten to put in the disclaimer that this came from the police. So instead of just doing the same thing that I've been doing throughout the report up until that stage, I just said, and this means Syria. And or rather, and by that he refers to Syria or something like that. So there were 2 instances where I had forgotten to be as meticulous as I'd been everywhere else. And that was his retaurical point, which was kind of clever, I think, of him, right? So trying to discredit my status as an expert witness by showing that I hadn't done a perfect report. And I agree, I hadn't.
Okay, none of us do.
No,
I think it's the only answer to that. But yes, it's a context where you can get pulled up on such things.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what was the outcome of the case?
Well, he was convicted, and ultimately he was deported from Denmark, yes.
Okay.
So it went through all the steps. So we have city courts and country courts and Supreme Court in Denmark. So it went all through all the steps, and everybody maintained that he was guilty, and the two higher courts decided that he needed to be deported from Denmark, and he has been.
Okay. We are very careful that we don't claim that the outcome of a case is a sign of our own success.
Oh, I absolutely don't think it is.
But you're proud of your part in the case. You're proud of your analysis. You feel you did a good job.
Yeah. I stand by my analysis. I still think it's a good piece of work, but I also want to mention that on the same day after my testimony, I could read in the newspapers that there was really damning evidence from a German investigator who had that list of people who had signed up to be part of that, and his name was there. And he had kept claiming that the only reason he was there the first time was to be a pizza baker.
Okay.
But on that list, it said that he was a fighter. So there was even more compelling evidence from an outside source that I had no access to. And after that, he decided to testify himself and actually admitted to some of it. So, and I don't think that it was my testimony that did that. But who knows? It made it, many nails in a coffin and stuff like that, right?
Vindicating, isn't it? When you, is that the word I mean?
Yeah.
You know, when you feel like that, you know, it supports everything that you'd said. And
absolutely.
It's not your victory, but nevertheless, it's it's reassuring.
So it is very reassuring that the things that I could point to in my analysis, which sometimes feels, this is a little vague, perhaps. Can I really say that? And I really feel the responsibility. It's a heavy responsibility when this is a court case, right? Yeah. This is a person's fate that I'm handling, and I'm contributing to whether he's going to prison or not. It's a heavy responsibility to have.
Of course it is.
So I was very concerned that I wasn't overreaching with my analysis. So it's been good to see that all of the things that I could point to were actually corroborated by external evidence.
It's that corroboration, isn't it? We provide one piece of the case and our evidence, and then other pieces of the case might contradict it, or as in this case, align with it, and then the court decides. We don't make those decisions ultimately. So thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about this fascinating case. It's been a real pleasure to hear about the Danish context for forensic linguistics.
Yeah, we wanted to give a truly kind of international angle to the podcast, so it's really great to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And so for our listeners, if you've got a question, remember you can get in touch with the show via email. We're at writingwrongs@aston.ac.uk.
If you've been affected by any of the themes in this week's episode, please consider contacting the resources in the episode description.
This has been Writing Wrongs, an original podcast series from the Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics at Aston University. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.